name is Srinath Kashyap, and today in this video I will explain to you the Ielts test, the format of the Ielts test and the evaluation criteria. So what does the Ielts stand for? It stands for International English Language Testing System. Okay, this is a test that is administered to people or students who have plans of going abroad, preferably to an English-speaking country, to settle down or work on a job or to pursue higher studies. There are two categories of the Ielts test. The first one is the general category and the second one is the academic category. Now, the Ielts test tests your proficiency in the English language in 4 skills, of which 2 happen to be receptive skills and 2 happen to be productive skills. The 2 receptive skills are reading and listening, and the 2 productive skills are writing and speaking. So once you enter the test examination center, you see you will be seated in a hall, and the first module you would be working on is the listening module. After that is the writing module, and once you are finished with the reading module, you will move on to the writing module. And now speaking, see the LRW in that order, which is listening, reading and writing, will be conducted on one day, which means you will be seated in the examination hall working on these modules for about 2 hours 40 minutes. And the speaking happens separately. It could happen on the same day of your LRW or within a week's time before your LRW or within a week's time after your LRW. Now let's look at the listening module of the test. The first thing you will do when you appear for the examination is the listening module. The listening module has 4 sections. Section 1, 2, 3, 4. Please note that the listening module is the same for the general test and the academic test. Okay? Now in section 1, 2, 3, 4, each of these sections has 10 questions. On the whole, you will work on 40 questions. The duration of listening is 30 minutes. But once you're done with your listening module, you will be given an additional 10 minutes to transfer your answers from the booklet into the answer sheet. Now what is a booklet? You see, when you're working on the listening module, you'll be given a headset with a volume controller, and you will have to listen to a recording, and as you listen to the recording, you will have to answer questions in a booklet provided to you. Please note that the recording will be played only once. So there is no question of pausing the recording, going forward or rewinding it a bit. All of these are not allowed. So you will have to listen to the recording only once, and as you listen to the recording, you will answer the questions. Now you can expect different kinds of questions in these 4 sections. Sections 1 and section 3 will have, in most cases, a conversation between people. See, when it comes to section 1, it is a conversation between 2 people. It could be as simple as someone calling up the reception desk of a restaurant and trying to make a booking, a reservation. Or it could be someone calling up the reception desk of a doctor's clinic or a dentist's clinic and trying to make an appointment for themselves. And there's a lot of details there, and based on the details in the recording, you will answer questions in section 1 and 3. Now section 2 and 4 mostly will have monologues. These monologues could be in an academic setting most of the time. So there's a person who is going to explain to you a lot of things about a particular subject. So as you listen to the recording, you will keep answering the questions. Like I mentioned, 30 minutes to work on the questions directly into the booklet, and another 10 minutes to transfer your answers from the booklet into the answer sheet. It's as simple as that. Now we'll move on to the next module. Once you're done with your listening module, the booklet will be taken away from you and you will be given another booklet if you are taking the paper-based test of the IELTS. If you're taking the computer-based test of the IELTS, then it's an entirely different issue. But we will talk about the paper-based test now. So another booklet will be given to you that will have 3 passages, long passages in the academic module. When it comes to the general module, of course it has the same 3 sections. But in section 1, you will be given 2 texts to work on. Section 2, 2 texts. And section 3, there's a long passage that you will have to work on. Now, the reading module will last for a complete 1 hour. The difference between the reading module and the listening module is that in the listening module, you are given an extra 10 minutes to transfer your answers, right? That does not happen in the reading module, which means within that 1 hour, you will have to finish answering the questions of all the 3 sections and write them down in the answer sheet. Now, the best way to work on the reading module is to directly write your answers into the answer sheet. This again, the module, doesn't matter which test you take, both of the tests have 40 questions. So see, if you open any IELTS preparation book, it will tell you you have 20 minutes to work on each of the passages. But it can vary depending on your speed and how effectively you can summarize information and how quickly or at what pace you're working on the questions. So each passage or section could have 13 to 14 questions. So the break most times happens to be 13, 13, 14, 13, 14, 13, that is 40 questions. It's up to them. It's not up to us to decide the break of the questions. Different kinds of questions can be expected in each of the sections. Some of the kinds of questions are, you will be given a couple of sentences and they will ask you to determine if these sentences are true or not. Which means, does each of the sentence agree with the information given in the passage or not? So based on that, you will either go for true or false or not given. Sometimes when you have a passage marked such as A, B, C, D with paragraphs marked A, B, C, D, E. So what happens in these cases most of the time is that you will be given a set of headings and you will be asked to choose an appropriate heading for each of the paragraphs. And another kind of question you can expect in the reading module is you will have to sometimes work on form filling, which is fill in the blanks in simple words. And well, you may also get a diagram that you need to label depending on the kind of passage or text you have received. So this is the reading module. It will last for 1 hour, and once you're done with this, the booklet will be taken from you and you will also have to return the answer sheet into which you have written all the answers to the 40 questions. Then your writing module starts. The writing module lasts for 1 long hour. It has 2 tasks, task 1 and task 2. In the academic test, the task 1 is a little different from the task 1 in the general test. The task 2 of both the tests is however the same. You will be given a topic and you will have to write an essay on the topic. There are 5 different types of essay questions. We work on those different types once we begin our actual sessions. Now we will talk about task 1 in the academic test. In the task 1 of the academic test, most times you will be given a chart, a graph or a diagram, and you will be asked to summarize the information given in that particular diagram. You will have to write a minimum of 150 words. But keep in mind, you should always aim to write at least 170 to 180 words. Okay? So this ideally will have 3 to 4 paragraphs, which your response will have 3 to 4 paragraphs. And task 1 in general test is a letter writing task. You will be asked to write a letter. Letters are of three kinds here. You may have to work on a formal letter, or an informal letter, or a semi-formal letter. Okay? Again, you will have to write a minimum of 150 words here. So please go all the way up to 170 to 80. But do not go beyond 180 words. There is a penalty for not meeting the minimum word requirement, but there is no reward for going beyond 180 words. It will become too long and maybe it will have a lot of unnecessary details. When you're working on task 1, the one thing you have to keep in mind is you are not allowed, especially in the academic setting, you are not allowed to report or write unnecessary or irrelevant information. Stick to the information given to you in the diagram, summarize all of it and write a report. In the same way, in the general test, when they give you a task to write a letter, you will have 3 prompts, which is the number of prompts you usually get, and you have to address all the 3 prompts of the question, which means on each of these points you will expand and write. Now task 2. Task 2 is the same for academic and general. Here you will be required to write an essay. Like I said, there are 5 different kinds of essay questions and we will learn to work on them in our sessions together. So in task 2, you are required to write a minimum of 250 words. Again, keep in mind, please write at least 270 to 280 words. Don't fall beneath the word requirement of 250 and don't go beyond 270 or 280. You will ideally write a minimum of 4 paragraphs. Sometimes, depending on the kind of essay question you have received, you may also have to write 5 paragraphs. Now, within the 1 hour you are given to work on the writing module, 20 minutes should be spent on task 1 and a good 40 minutes on task 2. Now, task 1 carries 1/3 or accounts for 1/3 of your score, overall writing module score. Task 2 carries 2/3 of weightage in your overall writing module. So keep in mind, you are always supposed to be spending more time on task 2 than task 1. So work accordingly. Now we'll move on to the speaking module of the Ielts test. Now the speaking module will have 3 parts, part 1, part 2, part 3. You can also call them sections. Think of the speaking module of the Ielts as a chat with someone there. You will enter a room wherein there's an interviewer and he will begin. He will make you feel comfortable in the first place, and once he is done with that, he will begin section 1 of the speaking module. Speaking module section 1 will begin with a few questions about your own personal self. These questions could be on the simple lines of what are your future plans, what are you studying currently, and so on. And once he is done with that, he will introduce a topic and ask you 4 to 5 questions on the topic. Now, most times, he will introduce a second topic as well, and he might ask you on the whole 10 to 12 questions. You will have to answer each of these questions with a minimum of 3 sentences and a maximum of 4 sentences, which means effectively you will utter responses that last for 30 seconds to each of the questions. The first section of speaking will last for about 4 to 5 minutes. Once this is done, we move on to the second section. In the second section, you will be given a cue card with a topic on it, and it will have 3 to 4 prompts that you will have to address in your response. Here we call this task an individual response task. So based on the topic you have received, you will have to prepare for a minute, for which you will be provided a piece of paper and a pencil or a pen as well. In this time for preparation, you must always make notes based on the question and the prompts you have received. At the end of this 1 minute, you will have to begin speaking, and you may have to speak continuously for 2 minutes. Sometimes it's 1 to 2 minutes, but most times it is 2 minutes. At the end of these 2 minutes, the interviewer may choose to ask you some follow-up questions, not more than 2 in most cases. And when this is done, which will last for 3 to 4 minutes, the interviewer will move on to section 3. We call this the discussion round or the speaking module. Here again you will be asked 4 to 6 questions. The difference between the discussion round and the first section, which is the question and answer section of the speaking, is that the discussion round, each question of the discussion round should be responded with at least a minimum of 4 to 5 sentences. So you will have to speak for longer than 30 seconds. And you will have to expand on your answers and on your ideas and respond accordingly. 4 to 5 minutes. On the whole, the speaking module will last for 11 to 14 minutes. Now this is the format of the IELTS test. I believe there is enough information for you to get started with IELTS. Now we'll look at the evaluation criteria of speaking and writing. See, we have already understood that reading and listening are receptive skills. You have the questions and the information right there in front of you, and based on that you will answer questions. But when it comes to writing and speaking, which are the productive skills, you will respond to questions. So your responses are very important here. And based on all the criteria for evaluation of the responses you've made, you will get an appropriate score. Now, speaking criteria. The first thing they look at in order to evaluate your responses are fluency and coherence. Now, fluency in simple terms, we all know what that means. How smooth are you in your responses? You are allowed to take a few pauses, but make sure the pauses are not too long. Neither are they too short. You have to know when to say what. And then, what do we mean by coherence? Coherence in simple terms means logical sequencing of ideas. For example, when you are responding to a question, you should always begin with the first idea, expand on it, and then if necessary, throw in another idea. So you have one idea here, justification of the idea, another idea, and you do the same again. Okay. Now the second evaluation factor is pronunciation. Pronunciation has a lot of things involved here. So when you are responding to questions in the speaking module, you have to keep in mind that you are saying the words correctly, not using the wrong pronunciation. What is also important here is when you utter responses, you will have to concentrate on word stresses also. Where do you have to stress in a particular word, and if there is another form of the same word, where do you have to stress? Intonation is very important. This, in simple terms, means rise and fall of your voice. You should know when to increase your volume a bit and when to lower it. And then contractions are allowed in your IELTS speaking responses. What's a contraction? It is, I'll give you a simple example so that you understand what a contraction is. See, in the English language, we have is not. When we make it, put it together and say isn't, it becomes a contraction. Do not becomes don't. Will not becomes won't. These are contractions. Now, contractions are usually used in informal language, which is allowed in the speaking module. Then we move on to grammar. Here two things are taken into consideration: grammatical range and accuracy. So, when it comes to grammatical range, it is important that you use active and passive voices appropriately. What are the different kinds of structures you are using? You have to use a wide variety of structures and make sure they are all grammatically valid. And then you have to use a combination of simple sentences and complex sentences. What is a simple sentence? A simple sentence is a sentence which has only one idea. A complex sentence is a sentence that has more than one idea. So you will have to use a combination of simple sentences and complex sentences. But keep in mind, do not get over ambitious and make every sentence of yours a complex sentence, because that might actually make you make more errors. So we'll move on to the last evaluation factor, which is vocabulary. In Ielts terms, this is referred to as lexical resource. See, one thing you have to keep in mind, if you look at this particular part, it says synonyms. It simply means if you should not repeat words that you have already used. If you've used a word, try not to use it as much as possible. Try to come up with synonyms. However, there's an exception to this rule, which says when you're unsure of the usage of a word, of the synonym of a particular word, try not to use it. It's better to use the same word than to make a mistake in using a word, the usage of which you do not know. And then collocations are very important. Collocations are the arrangement of words in a sentence. A mistake that most Indians make is, I did a mistake. You see, that is incorrect usage of English. So the correct form becomes, I make a mistake. It solves the purpose is something most people say. One is supposed to say, it serves the purpose. So these are examples of collocations and you have to use them appropriately. And then idiomatic English is allowed in the speaking module. This is generally not allowed in the writing module, but it is allowed in the speaking module. Idioms are phrases and expressions. For example, let's think of an idiom. See, when someone is asking you a question like, can you think of a solution to this problem? And that person responds saying, off the top of my head. Simply means the first solution that has come to his mind and he can think of at the moment is the solution that he is going to offer. So there are many idioms and you have to get yourself acquainted with as many idioms as possible. Another important point you have to keep in mind when working on responses to questions in the speaking module is that one word answers are not allowed. See, most of us in our general conversations with our friends and our family, when asked, what is your favorite dish? We might say, biryani. That doesn't work here. You will have to give a long, well-constructed sentence and you will also have to explain why you like biryani the most. See, when a question is asked to you in the speaking module in section 1 and section 3, the interviewer might not necessarily utter the word why. But it is understood that the why part of the question also has to be addressed. Which means, when someone asks you in the speaking module, in the interview, what is your favorite color? You cannot just say my favorite color is blue and sit there quietly. You have to explain to the person, you have to tell the person why blue is your favorite color. So you can begin with, it signifies this and this is the reason why I like this color. Or in my room there's a lot of, the walls are blue and I've grown up in an environment where there's a lot of, the color blue and hence I like it. So there are a lot of ways you can answer this question. So this is the evaluation criteria for the speaking module, and we will work on each of these individually in our classes together. We'll move on to the writing module now. The writing module again has 4 evaluation criteria. The first one is task achievement, and the second one is, within the first one, there's another one known as task response. Now, task achievement generally applies for task 1, which is your report writing exercise in the academic test or in the general test. It is your letter writing response. Task 2, task response is what applies in the case of your essay in both the categories of the test. Task response. See, when it comes to the task achievement, you have to make sure that you are answering the question in an appropriate way. You are responding to the task at hand the way it should be. In simple words, like I said, the task 1 of the general test has 3 kinds of letters: formal, semi-formal and informal. So if you get a semi-formal or a formal letter, you will have to respond in the same way. Here you cannot use contractions or idiomatic expressions. You have to use the correct style to write the particular letter. The same applies in the case of the report writing task. Never mix up styles. Task response here is basically how you respond to the essay topic. Have you addressed all that needs to be addressed in your response is very important here. Now we'll move on to the second factor, coherence and cohesion. Coherence, in simple words, could mean structure. It means, is there a logical sequencing to all your ideas in your response? Which necessarily means how you introduce an idea, how you expand on it, what are the examples you are using for it, and if you are introducing another idea, how you do it. See, ideas have to be introduced in an appropriate way. You cannot abruptly introduce an idea. You have to expand on one idea and make the transition from the first idea on the second one. Cohesion is where you will work on making the transition from one idea to another. This is where we use linkers or linking words. Now, what are linkers or linking words, you might wonder? See, sometimes when you're working on more than one idea within a particular paragraph, you will have to make sure that there's a smooth flow to your response, that no idea has been introduced abruptly. When you are adding details to a particular idea, you will have to use a word that indicates to the reader that this is the progression I am making at the point. So these are linking words. A couple of examples could be furthermore when you are adding details, moreover, when you are trying to introduce an idea that is contrary to the first one, you will say however or on the contrary. And you also have to make sure you're connecting ideas well. Now, one thing you have to keep in mind when you're working on the first factor is you will have to structure your response well, which is your response in the case of the essay task should have 4 paragraphs. First one is your introduction, the second one is your body paragraph, the first body paragraph, third one is your second body paragraph, and the last paragraph is your conclusion. Sometimes you may have to write an extra paragraph, which means you will have a third body paragraph after which you will have the conclusion. It depends on the kind of essay task you receive, you have to work on, and the kind of response you are developing. Now we'll move on to grammar, which again means grammatical range and accuracy. Like we discussed in the speaking module, things that are taken into consideration are active and passive voices, a wide range of structures, a combination of simple sentences and complex sentences. Accuracy here means how error-free are your sentences. That doesn't necessarily have to mean you cannot make any errors at all. But the point you have to make sure of here is that you keep your errors to a bare minimum. Finally, we have vocabulary, which in IELTS terms is referred to as lexical resource. Again, you will have to use a lot of synonyms. Paraphrasing is very important here. Paraphrasing is also important when you're working on coherence and cohesion. However, here, see, like I said in the speaking module, you will have to make sure that you don't repeat your ideas and the words that you have already used. This is an important thing you have to keep in mind. And here, unlike the speaking modules, idioms are not allowed. Collocations are, however, allowed. So, and another important thing you have to keep in mind is that make sure your writing responses are mostly formal, at least in the case of the essay task. So these are the evaluation criteria for speaking and writing. This is as much information you will need at this point of time. Now there are a couple of things you can do in order to meet this challenge of the IELTS test, besides working on all of these. So one must understand that the IELTS test is basically an English proficiency test. When we're talking about the criteria, speaking criteria, we have fluency and pronunciation. We have grammar and vocabulary. So overnight or within a month's time, you cannot expect your English to magically improve. You will have to work on it, which means you will have to keep exposing yourself to a lot of content in English. There are many ways to do this. Most of the IELTS preparation books have two ways that work most of the time. First one is you can start watching movies. Bear in mind, when you're working on the listening module, the questions will mostly be asked, or the recording is mostly in the British accent or the Australian accent. So you will have to work accordingly, keeping in mind the dialects of these two accents and the pronunciation of words in these two accents as well. So one way to do this is to keep you exposing yourself to a lot of English content, especially from Britain and Australia. Now, however, there are other methods also which can help you learn the right grammatical structures and vocabulary. So you can happily watch at least one Hollywood movie before hitting the sack every night. Hitting the sack means going to bed. This will greatly help you in improving your English. I suggest you always watch Hollywood movies with subtitles. That way you're reading and at the same time you're listening as well. This will help you a lot. Another tried and tested way to improve your language is picking up the reading habit, developing a reading habit. Now again, IELTS preparation books tell you to start picking up.
Continue.
So any IELTS preparation book will tell you to develop a reading habit. This will help you with your reading pace. This will get you exposed to a lot of literature in the world, and it will, in my opinion, reading is a wonderful hobby because it will open up the creative potential of your mind. See, when you're reading good literature in the language of English, you are exposing yourself to a lot of ideas that have generated in different parts of the world. This will help you think beyond beyond the boundaries of your world. So that way, when you're working on writing or speaking, which have many topics, you will be ready with a lot of information and a knowledge about these topics, and you can respond accordingly. Some of the other methods that are suggested are listening to English music, listening to the radio. The BBC is helpful in most times, but I suggest most of my students to watch a lot of movies and start reading a book. So once they finish reading a book, they can move on to another one. And when you read also, there are a lot of things you have to keep in mind when you're watching a movie as well. For example, if there's a word that you're not familiar with in the movie, in the dialogue of the movie, you can pause the movie, look up the meaning of the word in the dictionary, and you can continue watching the movie. The same can be done in the case of reading as well. When you're reading a book, try to make a mental note or a note in some book of yours of all the words and structures that you've encountered in the text. And try to look up the meanings and the usage of these words and structures. These two activities will eventually help you score high on the IELTS test. And the advantage of picking up a reading habit is that your reading pace will greatly improve, and who knows, probably you will be able to finish all the 3 passages within 45 to 50 minutes. I've known many students so far in my experience who have managed to finish all the 3 passages within 45 to 50 minutes, and they had enough time towards the end of the module to go and work on those questions that the answers of which they were unsure of. So this is one activity that will always come in handy when you're working on the IELTS test. What else? Communication, like I said, is very important. Communication skills are very important here, and you have to work on your communication. This is a daily process. You cannot expect to just attend a class for 2 hours or 3 hours a day and hope that your English will improve. Keep in mind that the IELTS does not have a set syllabus. This is unlike most other exams that are administered in the Indian education system. It is not like one of your college tests wherein you can mug up a lot of things in all-in-one, which is something that most people are doing in today's world, and go to the test. This will not happen. If you have, prepared ideas or prepared sentences and responses, it will not work in your favor, because the interviewer or the evaluator will easily be able to figure out that you have already mugged up all of these ideas and mugged up all of these structures, and you just come here and uttered them. So keep that in mind. See, it is also very important to establish good English communication skills at this particular point of time in your life. Because when you are taking the IELTS test, you essentially have plans of moving abroad to an English speaking country, either for a job, settling down there, or for education abroad. Which means you will have to work on a lot of literature which is in English abroad. I'm speaking about the conditions abroad, wherein everything is in English, in a country like America or Canada or Australia, which sometimes even Europe as well, if you go to UK, because these are the popular destinations for most people. And there, to survive in that society, English is very important. So start working on your English at this point of time. If you don't know what movies to watch, please text me and I will help you with that. And if you don't know which books to read, please contact me and I will help you with that. I hope I've managed to explain to you everything that needed to be explained, and all the basics of the test, how it is to be approached and how it is to be responded to, and I also wish you the best of luck. Thank you.